Hi, I'm Liz.
And I'm Rhea.
Welcome to Karma's My Bitch, a podcast about love,
Sex,
connection,
abundance,
joy,
purpose,
peace,
and how life isn't simply the stories we tell ourselves.
You know how when we were talking about there were three tent poles of separation?
Yes.
Religion, government, and the economy.
Yeah.
And these were the three that are falling down around our eyes.
Yeah.
And so obviously when we're talking about government, and I can understand how that one falling fits into everything, because being able to choose for oneself, etc., makes sense. I can understand how economy is falling down, because again, if you're looking at abundance and you're not tied to the old structures and strictures of the economy, and abundance is there, makes sense. But where does religion and dismantling that one fit into happiness and freedom and all the rest?
Well, that's a good question because, you know, for many, they might say it was just kind of obvious that the religion tent pole would go down because people have had, for better or worse, over the decades, had sort of a falling out with religion.
I mean, there's so many wars, right? Just made in the name of religion, even today, like
wars, abuses, a general falling out with religion. Where does it fit in my life? Like,
I don't want some God telling me what to do.
Yeah, no, I mean, it could be something as simple as it doesn't fit with my lifestyle. It's something I grew up in, but as I got older, I didn't care. To, like, as you said, it's more of like a fundamental, I don't agree with these beliefs. Like, we're all kind of falling on a different spectrum with that.
Because also religion, you know, is a very social construct in a lot of ways in terms of the stuff that it brings with it. You know, the church on Sunday, how one must behave when you lose your virginity, what a marriage looks like, what a family looks like, what devotion looks like. And so a lot of it just doesn't fit with these new generations, including mine, who come in and they're like, wait a second, this doesn't fit with anything of the way I live my life and how I want to live my life, you know? Yeah. But what I also notice is that in the vacuum, like, there's been such a rush for spirituality and new age stuff, and where people used to maybe talk about the Bible, now they're talking about manifestation. Where people used to maybe talk about some other religious thing, they're now talking about gratitude or mindfulness. And so in some ways, these other concepts have become a religion. I know that you probably have a much more positive, weirdly, explanation for this than I do, because I always feel that people like being told what to do. I'm pretty sure that
everyone's just sheep, Liz. And I'm like, well, I think it's because we exist. I think we exist all because of divine connection, and that's what everyone's seeking. And you're like, no, everyone's just sheep.
But do you know what I mean? People want to know. People go to, like, I haven't been able to figure out how to make my life better. And I've asked, you know, the first rung of management to fix it, i.e. the tent poles. So they're not doing it. So I want to see their manager. It's a bit like when you email the CEO. I'm going to go straight to the CEO and I'm going to ask the manifestation people and the gratitude people and the meditation people and the mindfulness people. Maybe I've got it wrong that way. And if that fails, I'm also going to just do some therapy along the way to make sure my brain is managing to cope with all the trauma I'm experiencing and refusing to acknowledge.
And then we'll declare ourselves rather a-religious, right? Like, oh, I'm just over religion. I'm not into that, which was also kind of a fad, right? Like, oh, where people suddenly started judging people who might still ascribe to a particular religion. It's like, oh my God, they're like so traditional or backwards or old-fashioned.
I mean, one of my best friends, like, I can't say the word angel without her literally gagging. She's like, I can't do it, you know? And even I know that a lot of soul memory stuff has a lot of religious connotations in it. And I'm not saying that it's religious, but you use a lot of religious words. And a lot of my friends who've done soul memory sessions just come back and be like, I didn't realize how religious it was. And I'm like, it's religious? It's not religious at all. And then I paused and I thought, and I was like, well, to be fair, she uses the word angel a lot. And, you know, she uses the word God a lot. And I can see how people can say that. But actually, when I look around my friends, it's very rare for me to know anyone who actually goes to church. A lot of people practice. But in terms of being extremely devoted to or ruled by religion, the way in which my grandparents were. I mean, my grandfather used to go to church every morning.
Soul memory has existed long before religion. A lot of religions have co-opted a lot of the language.
Oh, interesting. Maybe this is why I said credibility earlier.
I'm just saying, it's Because soul memory, we'd say, is a-religious, and there's nothing wrong with being a-religious. But what we have done by scrubbing our relationship to a religion we've scrubbed our relationship to the divine, because we've effectively scrubbed the relationship to ourselves and our divinity, because religion was effectively the passageway, right? It was the way in which we could connect to our divinity through someone else and through something else, right?
But isn't that then a good thing?
It was the surrogate.
We're removing the intermediary, and we're able to...
Well, we kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater in the process, which happens because, again, those pendulums tend to swing quite wide. And we often
I guess
need
we've
that
lost
to
all the
happen.
stuff like love thy neighbor as thyself, which is the I thou thing. And we've lost like do not kill. Like maybe some of the 10 Commandments were useful. By becoming irreligious, we've also become a bit immoral. And we hurt ourselves and then we hurt others. And we assume that there's no repercussions for that. When actually every time we hurt another person, we also hurt ourselves.
I mean, morality is still a concept. It was a concept that was co-opted by separation and used as a weapon, right? It was weaponized by separation. And
when we say separation, the idea that there's right from wrong, you are you, I am me, there are rules, there's judgment and shame in order to keep everyone in line. And that is effectively the society we've lived in and the society we're evolving out of.
right. So separation is effectively saying that I and God are not one. What underpins separation is exactly as you said, is polarity and judgment. By exercising polarity and judgment, we keep ourselves separate from God. It's effectively separate from who we are. And when we are separate from who we are, we cannot access what I call our divinity, what you call our personal power. And when we cannot operate from a place of empowerment where we are in our power, we just succumb to all the rules of separation that tell us that we're not good enough.
Yeah, unless.
Exactly. And so we find ourselves enslaved to all the processes and the tent poles that uphold separation, which, as you said, were government, religion, and the economy, right?
Yeah.
So as we've unpicked, and as this is the season about happiness, how do you define it and how do you sustain it? We're having to look at our relationship to these tent poles and how we operate within each one. So how we operate within the religious tent pole, and as we know, these tent poles have to come down, like you said before, but how do you do that without losing your divine connection? Because if it was always the surrogate for it, well, what we've been trying to show for the past few years now is, well, if you confront your not good enough story, if you confront your karma, and if you challenge it, and you go through your karmic undoing process, you realize how powerful you are. You realize that you are the divine in body, right?
Because you literally can create your whole reality based on following your heart, which effectively, in many ways, is you marry the heart and the mind so that they work together so that you're able to create a reality from that space.
Exactly, which we call full-bodied consciousness, where all your bodies are aligned. And if you can move into higher consciousness and fifth dimensional consciousness, which is oneness, blah, 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 there are plenty of seasons about that. Now, in terms of harmony and religion and happiness, we've gone from the a-religious, which serves to a certain degree.
Yeah,
because like I
independence
said,
is freedom.
Exactly. Because like I said, even soul memory predates religion. Soul memory is a-religious. But like any good tenant, right, of a tent pole is everything gets co-opted. So you're forced then to adopt that tent pole for your survival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't but have a bank account.
Right. I have to, my credit score determines whether or not I can have a car or a house.
Yeah.
But that divine connection that we end up losing in the process is what animates us. And what
Is it our life
animates us.
force?
It is, but it's more than that. So I can't say it's our life force full stop. There's a bit more to it than that. In this time in which, perhaps we're experiencing some hopelessness, when we might be sort of seeing that the world is shifting and where do we fit into that? Some might want to turn toward the divine, but you also are, you've also expressed that some might be turning away from. Like, I think my dad even said his issue with the whole God concept, having been to war and having seen horrific things, is, does a God really, that question, how does God allow for those things?
Well, people are asking that all the time, right? And they have recently.
Because we are God. We have the power to both create and destroy. If we are
We just
not,
keep using it the wrong way.
we keep using it. I mean, destruction is actually part of creation. It's a necessary part of creation because we're not always building from a blank slate, right? So our power to destroy is in order to allow creation. But what happens is that if we are not creating, which is very difficult to do in separation. So if we are not spending our time creating, then we end up becoming destructive, which is why we have said over and over again, their path out of your karma in part is your purpose. Because if you can
Because then you're
focus
creating
on,
something.
exactly. And if you can tap into the power that you use to create, you can actually be really constructive with your personal power, and then you become less self-destructive.
That makes sense.
You know, we all cannot deny that we have some kind of belief system by which we live, right?
Even if you're totally irreligious, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Because
Random chaos theory is still a belief system.
it is. It is. So to be alive is to believe, quite simply. Even if you choose to believe in nothing, you're still believing. Yeah,
Still
you're still
believing something.
conscious, right? Oh, hence why
You're still
consciousness
choosing
is-
to believe.
Exactly.
something.
You're exercising a choice. You're still exercising your consciousness
And
in
good on
whichever
you.
way. Right. Yeah. Because the reason why separation exists is so that we could have free will, the free will to make that choice. Because we are guided by belief, whatever it is, that belief creates our reality.
100%. And that's not just a law of attraction thing where
no.
what you put out comes back to you. It's also your
Precisely.
perceptions. It's, I mean, from a very simple point, and we talked a lot about this in the comic series, and maybe season 11 is the roundup of all the series, which is why we're kind of going through the comic point now. We all have a negative confirmation bias, and B, our perceptions dictate our reality. So if I'm coming from a place where I'm not good enough, I'm going to be looking for all the ways in which that is true, whilst hoping for all the ways in which it is not true, but whilst never believing them, right? So it doesn't actually quite matter what's happening in front of us. It matters far more what we're believing inside of us and how we're filtering that information, because that's the reality that we're then creating. Because in the end, when you're doing it that way, and this is just from a purely logic standpoint, mental body standpoint, but you're also then making choices from that space. So if I believed that someone was out to get me, I would naturally act more defensively. I would naturally act in a way that would maybe attack them. I would naturally act in a way, my choices would be based on that belief. Therefore, I would be creating more things from that belief, right? And pissing more people off. But if I'm coming from a place of unicorns and rainbows, and so my choices are couched in love, yes, some things might not go my way. Yes, some people might betray me or whatever else or disappoint me. But the fact of the matter is the choices I'm making allow for the possibilities of good things to come because I believe that good things are coming.
It's because the mental body has the ability to create so much just by sheer will, right? So it can create our darkness through our ego just as much as light through our connection to our hearts, just as you described.
And again, the ego isn't just I'm so great and an arrogance. It's the identity we have. So if my identity is one of a victim, or is the light that's coming through my heart one of someone who just loves the shit out of everything, right? And it does help us realize our realities.
Yeah. No, exactly, because our egos are the identities that we carry as a result of our not good enough story, right? Our
Which
karma.
again goes back to episode 1 of the season, which is if you're really truly self-expressing, you don't have that identity. You don't have any of those labels. You just are you. And the you that you are is probably a very hopeful, exciting you, but that has been told it cannot be. So without the it cannot be part, your dreams are therefore possible because simply, if anything else, you've created the space for them. But then I have a question. But you know how we were discussing, and we've written about it as well, about how mindfulness and going through the mind and stuff has exhausted us.
Yeah.
Right? So even though I've been talking a lot about this from kind of a mental body logic perspective of creating the space, blah, 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 the one bit that I guess it's not a question. The one bit that I missed out is that when we follow our hearts, we allow for the unpredictable to happen, which is even better than the predictable, because a lot of episodes we've discussed about a psychic may come to you and say you'll meet the love of your life in 6 months, or the person that you're with is actually someone that means this to you, not this to you, or whatever it is, right? But, and you can't imagine it. Your mind can't get there because your mind can only really create from what it knows, which means it can only create the future from the past.
Or from its limited perception, right? So even if the past isn't informing the mental body for whatever,
it can't see things that they never saw coming, right? And
not
we all
necessarily.
have things that never saw coming. And so really the bit that when we're coming from kind of a more conscious place and the heart gets involved and our spiritual bodies get involved is that we're making these choices, not knowing what could happen next. And then things happen next that maybe we couldn't have foreseen. And then we become a different person, then we become a different person, then we become a different person. We die and die and die again, as we said in the last episode, so that we
and die some more.
and then die some more. And then we end up becoming the person who does those things that we saw coming, but we could never imagine because we're not the person we were when we saw them coming in the first place. Like when I think about at the beginning of this whole podcast, I saw a lot of what was going to happen to me, but I just couldn't imagine it. And so my mind created all these shortcuts around it, saying that this would happen or that would happen. And I expected
or
that the person
if this
who I
happens, that it would have to be a result of X. So you'd be looking out for X to happen
in order for Y to happen afterwards.
Yeah.
But then the thing is that what I never saw coming was who I was going to become, which means that all the things that I saw happening to me weren't ever going to happen to the person I was. And they would never feel natural to that person. And as I said, experience makes normal.
And they would have never happened if you hadn't become that person.
Exactly.
Which is
and
why
I think that's the bit that we miss.
Yeah,
Because
that there is an
actually-
organic evolution to this. Which if you're
Exactly.
future projecting, you won't get there for that basic reason.
Yes. And the thing is that what I've learned, and I guess I don't really talk about this so much, is that and I've said this to you personally, I wasn't wrong about pretty much anything. Just the way in which I envisaged it, the way in which I saw it unfolding, the way in which I thought I would experience it because I thought I was the person I was rather than who I was going to become. All of it was different, not because it was worse or better, but because it wasn't possible until I'd stepped into the shoes of the person who could experience it. And the only way that I could do that wasn't to be ruled by my mind, because my mind would never have grown up. It was to actually allow my mind to experience new things and new possibilities so it could expand. And with my mind expanding, as my heart expanded and as all my bodies expanded, my world expanded as a result. And that bit, that unpredictable nature of it all, that's the bit that we miss, because whilst we can see, and we've discussed this in other seasons, especially the season about fate, whilst we can see a good, sometimes even 10% of our fate that's coming, we also have to get to, as we said in this season, the humility to understand that we don't quite know how or when, and it may not look exactly as we thought it would, but it doesn't mean it doesn't work. Like, I know this is going to sound like a very strange side example, but a long time ago, and we joke about it a lot, when you said war is coming, and I was like, oh my God, that's really out of the blue and I'm not putting this anywhere, right? And at the time it wasn't anything, but as time went on, I understood what you meant by that, and it wasn't what my mind thought war is coming meant then, right? It was something else. So, and I've learned this a lot with guidance in general, is that sometimes it's not that they don't tell us the truth, they do, but they also tell us the truth knowing how we're going to internalize that truth.
I don't know if it's internalize as much as understand it or interpret it.
Fine, interpret it. That's a better word. When it comes to anything, our souls know the way far more than the rest of us. And for me anyway, the biggest highs of all the highs I've ever experienced are twofold. One, when I realize I was right, and I have further faith and trust and knowing and hope in myself. And two, when it clicks in a way that I never saw coming, and I understand that, oh my God, my soul was right all along.
Yeah.
And I feel this like magical high that propels me to the next one.
To get to that point where you can tap into your soul and be guided by your soul means you have to release the pressure and the dependence upon the mental body. And evolving into 5D is effectively that. And we talk about that through like, if you can get to full bodied consciousness, you're well on your way. Because if you're aligning 3 of your bodies, then one isn't ruling, right? But the issue is that if you're not being ruled by the mental body, right, which is, as we've said in before, the mental bodies become corrupted by our life in polarity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It naturally goes to the shoulds, the woulds, the coulds, the rules, the judgments,
It is
the
very
shames.
difficult. Now, if somebody is a very mental body person, not saying anyone's name in the room, but like if you're a really mental body person, it doesn't mean that you stop being a mental body person, if that makes sense.
Use it differently.
You just use it differently in a much more expanded way. But again, it doesn't rule your life. But it does give you, it does help enhance your purpose because it's how you process your purpose.
I mean, being able to connect dots, being able to see things, being able to explain what you say in normal words, that's all my mental body.
Yeah.
But what my mental body doesn't do anymore is go, well, if I do X, then Y will happen, and then Z will happen, and then freak out because Y didn't happen. And so I have to think of 7 other plans, and then I have so much anxiety, like literally my brain blows.
Yeah, exactly. Which is just your limited brain, right? And your limited mind. And you also can't really exist through your heart because your heart has been duped by all the illusions that the mind has been feeding it, right? And so you effectively, the most efficient and effective way to operate is, as you said, through your soul, because your soul is multidimensional. It's all knowing and all existing. And with so much history, right, because of all the lifetimes in which it's existed, you can actually work through it all to give yourself like more direction while you're in this body. It's like you have so much wisdom. It's just a matter of tapping into it.
Hold on, rewind. What do you mean we can't really exist through our hearts?
We're talking about like your full on conscious emotional body, which is then directed by your soul, right? That's your access to your spiritual body. That's the bit that's multidimensional.
Oh, okay, fine. I understand what you're saying. It's a bit like, and we've said this in a previous episode, you're not your emotions and you're not your thoughts, right? Because those are all your karmic stuff. But actually, when I say follow my heart, I don't mean follow my emotions. I mean what brings me peace. I mean exercising trust, faith, hope, and knowing. And that's
well,
not
exactly.
my
and
emotions.
that's a very
that's my spiritual body.
But
You're
that's
right.
a very
I understand.
Precisely, but that's a very expanded notion.
If you don't know what it is, eventually you can do the same thing a million times, wondering why you keep getting landed in your karma. Eventually you say, fuck this, you do something else. You're always going to end up in the right place. There's no wrong or right in this. We get to where we're going to get to in the time we're going to get to it, and we're always doing our best for ourselves. That's cool.
Yeah.
But when I talk about coming through the karmic undoing process, when I talk about making magic, when I talk about knowing anything, it's this deep gut feeling that's it feels far bigger than my emotions on the top. It's a bit like, random example, when I was, when I used to have crushes on people, like people being like kind of my relationships, like in and coming out of my karma, there'd be times where I'd be so angry or so upset with something they've done, right? And I'd want to send like essays of text messages or like make all this drama, and nothing would have happened. But these are all my feelings that I'm working through. Those feelings are the feelings as a result of all my past, right? They're not feelings that are happening in that moment. But there's another part of me that's quite calm, and it's like, it's all okay. And actually, as you used to say to me, sleep on it. I'd go to sleep, allow myself to process whatever it actually was that was bothering me. And 99 out of 100 times, it had nothing to do with the person in front of me and everything to do with the people that had come before. Those emotions were old emotions. So I agree with you in the sense that our hearts have been duped, because actually, until we clear all the old emotions that we've been holding on to during our karmic story, and a bit beyond, until they're clear and we're able to just tap in and know how we're feeling in the moment with no prejudice. That's what, for me, following my heart is. But I guess what you're saying is when you're tapping into that place with no prejudice, you're actually tapping into your soul.
Yeah. And you're allowing your higher self to guide you.
Yeah.
When we're needing guidance for our soul, right?
Yeah.
Some might end up falling into religion because that's the only thing they might know. Yeah. Either because of their community or just habit or the way or their culture.
And also just bypassing all the emotions in the brain to just have that soul connection, even if it's briefly, because it's such a peaceful place to be, which is why so many people love going to churches and being in religious spaces or connecting to religion, because you end up having a soul moment. whether or not it's a soul existence.
Right, because it's not always easy to create sacred space for yourself. A lot of people don't know how to do it. Because again, they just think everything exists outside of them. If I go there, I'll feel better, because they don't know how to feel better in their own space. Some may not be able to really articulate what their needs are, what their soul needs are, right? So if you're turning to religion, the one issue is that it's like the blind leading the blind, because religion doesn't necessarily have a mechanism for fitting into full 5D oneness consciousness because of its roots in separation.
And also how we read it is in within separation, how it's been interpreted as separation.
Exactly.
To read the actual scripts and read it with an open heart and mind. And when I say that, it's without any of the karmic shit, so it's clear, as we were just discussing.
Yeah.
Then actually it's probably got quite a good idea and description. We read it and then interpret it and then impose it through separation.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of wisdom. There's a lot of compassion. There's a lot of perseverance through one's suffering. You know, it's like, you know, you got this if you want.
And there's a
like
lot
it
of love
acknowledges.
in there.
Yeah, but a lot of it's also tainted by its own history, right? So it's imperfect, and that's okay. If we can see it for what it is and filter through that, that's fine. But it's not necessarily the singular solution, right? Not the path to happiness, if you will, which is really what this is about.
Yeah. But then in order to transcend these like separation tools, like religion, whilst also trying to find that connection to our souls, how do we do it?
Well, the solution isn't necessarily to become a-religious, but to really carefully examine our belief systems and understand why we have them, right? Like, so am I doing this because I feel like I need to save myself? Am I doing this? And am I turning to this because I need someone to hold my hand because I don't believe that I can do this? Am I grieving? Am I suffering?
Or am I trying to heal?
Exactly.
Am I trying to transcend? Am I trying to provide and find my divine connection?
Yeah. Well, is it to provide? So yeah, am I turning to it for a divine connection because I cannot cultivate that within myself? And so effectively what these questions are ways to examine what's your block? What are you looking toward? Because a lot of people are still going to push some kind of religion or faith as a path to happiness because of that divine connection. Our divinity is seen as key to happiness. Community is seen as key to happiness, right? But we don't do these things because of some personal handicap. We do them full-bodied choice. But most people aren't making that.
Because they bring us joy.
Yes, exactly.
Not because they bring us relief.
Because we're bringing something to it. We're not feeding off of it. So in separation, everything is we're feeding off the teat of the tent poles. In 5D, we're all building that foundation of oneness. Am I bringing my joy to this community?
It's the sourced and be sourced, right?
Exactly.
Am I bringing my joy to this community, and is it then reflecting it back to me? Or am I just taking, and it's filling an empty hole that I'm not being able to fill up?
Exactly. So where's the power here? That's really what we have to ask ourselves. Where is my power coming from? Is it coming from within? Or am I being imbued with it because I'm choosing to believe in this or adopt this particular belief system?
And therefore, is it even my power?
Exactly. Because if it's not, then we're still going to be in a constant state of disempowerment and surrender. It's just going to be sort of morphed and skewed in a way where we can't maybe see it. And then we don't find ourselves that much better off than we started, even if we've convinced ourselves otherwise.
Because that's the thing. Look, I mean, I know a lot of people who turn to religion and who have always been religious. And as you've said before, religion was really useful to you when you were growing up because it gave context for you of all the things you saw and everything that you experienced. I definitely see with a lot of the people around me, religion is going to light a candle, being in a church is what reminds them of their divine connection. But it's not because the priest said so. It's a very personal thing. And I think that's the thing that we miss when we look at religion in the way that it's been kind of around us, is that religion is the something that we have in common, but the rules of religion is the thing we have in common. It's the identity within religion is that we have in common, and therefore we're constantly enforcing those within each other. But if religion to you is something very personal that just reminds you of your own divine connection and doesn't need any of those rules around it, but the rules that you have within yourself are values that you hold, then
No, it is fine. And it's beautiful because effectively what you're saying is if you have that relationship to yourself, you can bring that relationship to a larger community, whatever it is. And that community completely benefit from that. And so it becomes a mutually beneficial relationship because in 5D, everything's relational.
Everything is relational.
Everything. So we're not saying, oh, as the religion tentpole goes down, all religion will just kind of cease to exist.
Yeah.
To some degree, that may happen, to a certain degree. But it's really so that we can bring the fullest understanding that we had lost when we had that all of that knowing stripped away and all of that connection stripped away, which was that we are the divine. And that is always going to be the core.
When anyone experiences something really great and light, you naturally want to share it and you naturally want to experience more of it. And that's the bit that matters. And that's why, in a way, 5D is also so relational, because you want to share your light and you want to see other people. It brings you joy for other people to be in their light too. And so it's not about, oh, we're narcissists, we can do everything alone, we don't need anyone to facilitate anything for us.
I am the divine, and therefore I'm
it's
so
not
great.
That at
I'm
all.
divine.
It's the personal connection inside that gets exuded outwards, rather than if I grab onto this connection on my outside, maybe I'll feel it on the inside. That doesn't work.
As I said before, I don't see an absence of religion. I see a rise in communities. And what we were hoping for, and it's a sincere hope, is that these communities are representative of everyone's divine connection and divine power.
And
so
respect.
so that new generations will also come into that, whatever that looks like. We're no longer at war with ourselves and each other.
I see the divine in me, and I respect the divine in you.
Yeah. Thank you for listening. For more information, articles, and inspiration, find us at karmasmybitch.com and at karmasmybitch.insta.
And if you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review.